Good morning. Buenos días. Buenos días. So, as they mentioned, my name is Joe Rodriguez. I am the Deputy State Director for United States Senator Richard Blumenthal. But I'm here today because yo soy Boricua. And while I work for a member of Congress, I have my own thoughts, my own beliefs. And I'm here today, united with you all, so we can leave here today with an agenda for Puerto Rico. So I want to thank Centro for having me. I want to thank the leaders in Holyoke for organizing today's very important discussion. I have participated with similar discussions in New York and New Jersey, so it feels good to be home in New England. Between Dr. Melendez's remarks, his presentation, the recent video which you all just saw, we have the foundation for today's panel. And we have three very, very, very talented panelists. As you know, I have been tasked with facilitating today's discussion. Today's discussion, you all have a copy of the program book. The goal is to provide the most recent updates on key players in critical policy arenas, to humanize the crisis, provide overview in most recent developments and civic engagement to mitigate the impacts on the most vulnerable sectors of the population. That's the goal of today's panel. And with that, again, we have three very talented individuals who are here to speak to that. Before I introduce our panelists, logistics. This discussion will run roughly 45 minutes. I know we are extremely behind, but roughly 45 minutes. Each panelist will have 5 minutes to give remarks. 5 minutes to give remarks. It is important that today's discussion is inclusive. So we will have volunteers walking around with index cards if you have comments or questions. So again, we will have volunteers. I don't know who the volunteers are, but we will have volunteers passing out index cards for questions to ensure that your input, your questions is included. So are we ready? With that, our first panelist, introductions, is Gretchen Sierra Zorita, Project Director of Media Diversity Initiatives for the National Hispanic Foundation for the Arts in Washington, D.C. Good morning.
Trabajo en Washington con un montón de actividades de la diáspora, además de lo que me presentaron. Gracias. So anyway, welcome. I've been asked today to talk to you about the debt and what does that mean, what is the debt, and what kind of global repercussions it has for Puerto Rico, or holistic repercussions in 5 minutes. So I'm trying to cover some of the background. But I really wanted you to get a sense of what's in here in terms of what we're up against. Now, you have all heard the number of $70 billion, which is what we have in debt. This is the largest per capita debt load in the country. I believe in total, California and New York might be higher, but they're large economies and they have a greater population. So we have the largest debt load by far. This does not include $43 billion in unfunded pension liabilities from our government pension plans that will come down the pike. Now, the debt that we have doubled in the last 10 years, due to structural problems in the economy and inability to cover operating deficits. So it is. So during this period of debt doubling, Puerto Rico borrowed in extensive amounts. Our current debt load is $70 billion, but What we issued in buy and sales since 2000 was $127 billion worth of bond sales since the 2000s. And of that amount, 900 million was in brokers' fees. So of that debt, 900 million went to financial institutions, which is problematic. Now, last year, the governor of Puerto Rico said that we could not pay the debt, that it was unpayable, that he would have to cut services. I personally agree with the governor on this. And since then, we started defaulting. Till now, to today, we have defaulted to the tune of $1.4 billion. At this point, our defaults are larger than the fees we paid to our creditors since 2000, the year 2000. So that kind of, I hope those numbers give you an idea of where we are and how big these numbers are. Now, Edwin explained to you how this was a result of one, the elimination of Section 936 in 2006, and then we took a double whammy with the 2008 recession, and since then we have not been able to recover. Since 2006, we have lost 80,000 jobs in Puerto Rico. Now we know, again, that these issues are structural. You know, we had the 936 was over, and that was one of the means that we used to bring income, and we had the recession, and then the structural issues of running an economy as a colony. We have lots of constraints, which you all know about, but then one issue that is not discussed a lot is corruption. Corruption does add to our problems, our economic problems, and our way to make our government competitive. It does get in the way of economic growth, and corruption is something that has been rampant in Puerto Rico in every single administration, pretty much. We have had indictments, we have had convictions. There's a huge case going on right now, and it's something that's endemic to our political system, in which big businesses feel a need to finance the political machines of the parties in return for contracts and favors, which do get in the way we run ourselves. So it's not just structural elements of the colonial economy, it's us as well, is the point I'm trying to make there. Now, as a result of this situation we have in Puerto Rico, during this period, unemployment that runs between 10 and 15%, right now it's around 12%. Our labor force participation is around 40%, in the US it's around 63%. Our labor force participation is expected to drop another 3% by 2020. This is due to the fact that we have an aging population and our young people are leaving. So we're going to have even a smaller labor participation. Now, the impact of this debt, where it worries me the most, is on the population outflow, because basically we're being decimated of our human capital. Between 2000 and 2015, we lost 600,000 Puerto Rico net loss migrated elsewhere. That means that when you take out people who came in, or people who or people who died, this is net loss. We lost 600,000 in those years, in those 15 years. Between 2010 and 2015, we lost 300,000. So you can see the time period, we had 600 total, but half of it was very recent, which is what's going on. We also have an issue of declining birth rate in Puerto Rico. It has declined by 1/3 in the last 15 years, between 2000 and 2015. And so what we have is a situation where our young are leaving, because the people that are leaving tend to be on the young side. Our elderly people are staying. Our birth rate is dropping, and so we have a very, a very problematic population situation. Since 2000, every population 65 and over has increased, and 24 and under has decreased substantially. Now, these people will talk in greater detail about how does this impact us, but there's two areas that are of great concern to me. One has to do with health, of which Dennis will talk about at great length. We do not, due to the debt situation, due to the population exit. I mean, the challenges of growing an economy when you have a debt, when you have outward migration at the levels we're having, and then you have other issues in the way. One is health. We have a huge health deficit that Dennis will talk about. Runs to the tune of over $1 billion a year, and he can explain it later. But to give you an idea of the debt disparity, the health disparity in Puerto Rico, Mississippi is the poorest state in the union. They received $3.6 billion for 700,000 people in Medicaid. This was in 2014. Puerto Rico receives $260 million for 1.2 million people. The only reason the government has to make up the difference, and recently, because of Obamacare, we did get money to make up for that difference. That money, and we'll talk about it. So you have the issues of, this is a population that is going to suffer more for lack of health care, but also the budget gap that this health care creates for them. And also the inability of the same aging population with very specific needs. Add on that SICA, which we do not know how it's going to turn, but estimates for SICA, and Puerto Rico, as you know, is SICA Central. There's 3,176 cases in the U.S. There's 17,694 cases in Puerto Rico. Among those are around 1,000 pregnant women. The cost of a SICA baby is estimated, and this includes pregnancy and a baby who has some type of neurological issues. We do not know whether microcephaly or others. Is around $4.1 million per SICA baby. I do not know that Puerto Rico can shoulder that cost. The other area I want to talk about, and that the debt and how it's related also to the debt, is education. Capital. Our human capital is one of the resources that we have. Our human capital is leaving, but also the way we're educating the one that is staying is not good enough. This again will have repercussions, it's related to the debt, but will have future repercussions. While it is true that Puerto Ricans are educated on par with Americans in terms of their educational levels, the quality of education is very poor. It's reflected, we have among the worst math scores in the world, forget about this country. Also at the bottom, those are indicators of future economic growth. So that's another area that's related to the debt, future growth, and our potential. So I hope in a nutshell, I was kind of give you a flavor of how all these things are intertwined, and I hope it was not too confusing. Thank you.
Thank you, Gretchen. Again, if you have questions for Gretchen, please, you all should have index cards. Please start formulating your thoughts, and if you want to start handing them up forward, we can include your questions in the panel. Our next panelist, as Gretchen alluded to, is Dennis Rivera. Dennis is with Unidos, Salud, which is in Puerto Rico, I believe, correct? Dennis, the floor is yours.
Thank you. First of all, it's great to be here, and I want to commend Edwin for doing this and pulling all us together to talk about these issues. And I've never been before here in Holyoke, and it's interesting learning and seeing what you have accomplished here. And congratulations, and I hope you have a successful conference today. Well, I'm going to be talking about healthcare. Before I was doing this, I was the president of the Healthcare Workers Union in New York, and then in the United States. And as such, I was involved in the gaining of the passage of the Affordable Care Act, with President Obama. And during that period, we fought aggressively to pass, as part of the Affordable Care Act, a one-time block grant of $6.4 billion for Puerto Rico to help pay for the Medicaid population in Puerto Rico. Medicaid is the program that basically gives care for the poor, the indigent, and as Gretchen was saying, Puerto Rico received only about $250 million, where, for example, other states across the country receive dramatic sums of money. And the reason for that was because Puerto Rico is a territory of the United States, and they have the Medicaid program and the Medicare program in some ways is different between the states and the territories. The programs of Medicaid and Medicare are different from the states and the territories, and Puerto Rico is a territory of the United States. And as a result of that, we got that $6.4 billion to Puerto Rico that was supposed to be used from 2014 to 2019. Well, the Fortunio administration went to the federal government, got them to allow them to use the money right away. So at this moment, that $6.4 billion, and that was in 2011, that $6.4 billion is about to expire. Namely, that next year, in 2017, we will receive no extra monies from the Affordable Care Act, from Obamacare, and basically we go back to what Gretchen was saying. We roll back to that. At this moment, for every dollar that is spent in Puerto Rico right now, Puerto Rico puts 45 cents, and the federal government puts 55 cents. Next year, when that happens, Puerto Rico will have to put 85 cents, and Puerto Rico and the federal government will put 15 cents. What does that mean? That means that in Puerto Rico right now, 3.5 million people live in Puerto Rico, of which 47%, 1.6 million people receive Medicaid. So at this moment, the payments for a 1-year payment for one patient in Medicaid, one person in Medicaid, it's about close to about $1,700. If you take away the money from the federal government, basically Puerto Rico will have to come up with about $1.6 billion a year. And this is the same Puerto Rico that right now does not have the ability to pay the bondholders, to pay. So in essence, at this moment, as a matter of fact, and we could be talking about this for hours, at this moment, how the Medicaid program works is it's a federal and state program. And in order to receive the federal dollars, Puerto Rico has to match up the 45 cents. In other words, Puerto Rico doesn't get it's the 55 cents of the federal government if they don't put their 45 cents. So at this moment, Puerto Rico is having a hard time coming up with the 45 cents to collect the 55 from the federal government. So as a result, imagine if Puerto Rico all of a sudden loses $1.6 billion. So I've been working very closely with the Department of Assess and the government of Puerto Rico, and they have made studies that says the following: that if we lose $1.6 billion, the options that Puerto Rico has next year is either one of the three. One, to drop 1 million people from having insurance. In other words, the super poor are the ones who are going to be getting healthcare benefits, and let other people, The other one, impose a co-payment. So, in other words, if your plan costs $1,700 a year, so you have to come up with $900 to pay for it. So that's not going to happen. So basically, that's the situation that we're looking. Right now, as we speak, there's close to 500 doctors leaving Puerto Rico a year. And why do they leave? Because since Puerto Rico received less reimbursement, for example, a doctor here, the doctor who's associated with the hospital here in Holyoke, the average salary for them, for a general practitioner, is close to $200,000. In Puerto Rico, it's like $3,000. So the only thing that you have to do is buy a Delta, JetBlue, American Airlines ticket, and you get a $120,000, $140,000 salary increase. And that's happening every day. The other thing that's happening with the doctors have a little storefront where they give care. They employ 3 people, and because the government has no money, they're not getting reimbursed, but they gotta pay the rent, they gotta pay the people who work for them. So then say, forget it, I gotta get out of here, I can't take this tension. So they're leaving. So this is the reality, and we could talk at great length about this, but this is the reality of Puerto Rico right now. Puerto Rico is on the verge of a human catastrophe if we are not able to basically change this course of action. I have to tell you that things are promising. When we started this journey, the overwhelming majority of the people of Puerto Rico didn't know that we had a fiscal crisis in healthcare. Right now, not only everybody's aware of it, but there's a consensus in Puerto Rico from all the political parties, for every religion, that we have to deal with this issue. Because healthcare is the most important aspect that we have in our life. Without health, you have nothing. So, in that sense, at this moment, there's a consensus that we gotta solve this problem, and as such, we put a march both in the United States and in Puerto Rico, and we were able to change the President of the United States policy, Obama, to say that territories were going to be treated differently than the states. Obama and the Department of Health and Human Services of the United States told the United States Congress there should be one program for Medicaid for the territories and the states, and if that will come to happen, Puerto Rico will get $3 billion from the federal government, not 1.6. That we have one little problem. The Republicans don't want to approve that. That's our little problem. So at this moment, I would invite you to follow the work of the Fiscal Control Board, La Junta, on Promesa, because they have been asked to solicit documents about the crisis in Puerto Rico, and there's a consensus that there have to be a solution to this issue, and hopefully one of the first recommendations that they give to the Congress is let's agree with the proposal that President Obama to extend full Medicaid program to the people of Puerto Rico. Gracias.
Thank you, Dennis. Our third and final panelist is attorney Ruth Santiago, who I believe just arrived from Puerto Rico last night. And I was also told who has a very close connection to Holyoke. Her two goddaughters in the audience are from Holyoke, and one attends this high school. So shout out to Holyoke High School and the students that are here. Counsel, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Saludos a todos y a todas. I'm really happy to be here and to see this wonderful turnout, and you know how Puerto Ricans, wherever we are interested and willing to lend a hand to address the crisis that we're confronting in Puerto Rico, and as the previous speakers have stated, have implications for Puerto Ricans here in the States. So I guess you'll think that I'm going to change gears a little bit, but I will talk about the energy issues in Puerto Rico, but that does have, you know, a huge relationship to health, because as most of you know, in Puerto Rico, energy generation is based overwhelmingly on burning fossil fuels, oil, coal, natural gas, and the health implications of that type of energy generation is devastating, especially for the poorest and most excluded communities. And that applies not only in Puerto Rico, but here in the States as well, right? That's what environmental justice is about, right? That the poor communities, lots of Hispanics, especially in the States, the correlation between Hispanic communities and environmental justice issues or contamination is higher than any other group in the U.S. And so the same situation applies in Puerto Rico, except as to the socioeconomic aspect, right? So, in other words, all the big Puerto Rico Electric Power Authority plants are located in very, very poor communities with very high unemployment. That is specifically Salinas, Guayama, Peñuelas, Guayanilla, Cataño. You get the idea. Very poor communities that house and are the hosts to the big plants that generate energy in Puerto Rico based on the burning of fossil fuels. So basically, I think that a large part of our fiscal and economic crisis has to do with that decision in PR to build a huge fossil fuel generation system. 98% of the energy, did I say that already? Okay, so it's just an amazing number when you look around, you know, and just compare, for example, the Virgin Islands, the US Virgin Islands, is already generating 20 to 25% of its energy based on renewable sources. You know, Hawaii, and I'm doing the comparisons that are most similar to Puerto Rico jurisdictions. You know, island nations, it's not the same, you know, to generate energy on the basis of, you know, sort of relationships, interconnected relationships with other states as it is on an island. It is a more difficult and complicated thing to do. Basically, the debt that has been a part of overbuilding this system is now heavily weighing on us as a country, and it's like $9 billion, and the plants are not even worth maybe around half that, right? So it's like, you know, when you have a mortgage and you're underwater, right? Your house is not worth what your payments are. That's the situation in Puerto Rico. And so there was a move to restructure the debt, but we are working with groups in southeastern Puerto Rico and also with Puente. The Williamsburg is actually has organized a group in Puerto Rico, and we have been able to do an analysis with the Institute for Energy, Economics, and Financial Analysis in IEFA, and they work both with groups in the States and in Puerto Rico and worldwide, and they're saying that it is viable for Puerto Rico to move out of that heavily dependent fossil fuel generation that contaminates so many of our communities and creates such a health crisis. We have a recent study from the University of Puerto Rico Graduate School of Public Health that indicates that, for example, in Guayama, the respiratory disease rates are 5 to 6 times higher than in other communities that are not exposed to that same level of emissions that, for example, comes from the AES coal combustion plant. Puerto Rico has a very sort of unique situation, and well, actually, for the US it's unique, but for the world it's all too familiar. At the dawn of the 20th century, we got our first coal-burning power plant. You know, here in the States, that was the traditional way to generate energy, right? From the 1800s or maybe even prior to that, you know, burn coal to generate energy. And it used to be that the coal industry was called the king coal, right? The power, that economic power that they had. So here in the US, you know, there's been a movement away from that. There's integration, much more integration of renewable energy than obviously in Puerto Rico. And, but we went sort of backwards in that sense. And I think it has to do, one of the causes of this is that in Puerto Rico, I think we adopted a plan to replicate what was done here in the States in a small island, right? So it was like the Los Angeles model of development, sprawling, you know, construction, and now, you know, we have this situation where we have to overcome what can be called a sustainability crisis, right? And so how do we get there? How do we convert our energy generation system into a more sustainable one? Well, I mean, working with IEFA and other groups, we think that it's very similar to what people can do here and what Puerto Rican communities can get involved with here, and some of you are doing. I know Asociación Puerto Rican en Marcha, right? They're doing green energy, green buildings. You know, they just got a prize for a beautiful Paseo Verde project that's very highly sustainable. But there are also things called solar communities, right? For example, a community comes together and collectively install and implement a solar energy project on rooftops. The UPR Mayagüez professors are telling us that energy generation in Puerto Rico needs to be wide-scale solar rooftop generation, not on our agricultural lands, right? The way some of these projects, some of the few projects that we have been on agricultural land. We need food security in Puerto Rico, as you know. We have a limited territorial expansion, and we need to use the resource that is available on rooftops. But this is not a matter of just simply, solar energy. That's not the solution to everything. Obviously, there are other aspects that have to do with communities getting really organized and Puerto Ricans becoming really having energy literacy and sustainability as a goal, adopt that as a goal. I mean, as a good friend of mine says, Puerto Rico is a beautiful place with serious problems. And just as in the States, we need to think about energy conservation. We need to think about energy efficiency, more efficient kinds of appliances and home and business equipment. We need to talk about something that's a little more complex, like demand response management. Like, for example, in Puerto Rico, even if we don't have energy storage facilities, right, we can have a program to incentivize energy use during the daylight hours and have the energy demand peak take place during the day so that we can install more renewable energy facilities, and as I say, on the rooftops. So that's just an idea. I think we can do it. The communities here, obviously in this field of environmental justice, we think globally and act locally. And the Puerto Rican communities here can also get involved in this movement and then, share that knowledge of those experiences with us in PR. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Santiago. So we have quite a few questions from the audience. In an attempt to answer as many as possible, I'm going to ask the panelists to please be very brief and very direct as possible in answering the question. And again, in an attempt to answer as many as possible. So I would also ask the audience to please bear with me as I read through some of the index. So the first question is directed at all three panelists. What do you suggest is the most immediate need that would aid Puerto Rico in the current humanitarian crisis?
I think $3 billion for healthcare. Because if you basically give $3 billion to Puerto Rico, the government of Puerto Rico will only have to put 17 cents of every dollar to pay for healthcare, and that money that they are currently paying could go from somewhere else.
I agree. Also, more in line with my background, I think it is critical that we be active politically, not only in terms of voting, which I urge you to do not only in national elections but in midterm elections, but in terms of calling your Congress people about Puerto Rico or whatever you care, that they feel your presence. They are your Congress people, and that is key. I just want to make a note. The Congressional Hispanic Caucus had its gala in Washington, D.C. this week. This is what we call Hispanosteria Month, because Hispanic Heritage Month. Both the president and presidential candidate Hillary Clinton talked to the Latino community at this gala. Puerto Rico was not mentioned in either speech. This is a regular incident and a regular event at all levels of politics. So to me, this is urgent. The population drain in Puerto Rico is real. I'm very afraid of a tipping point where we cannot recover and bring it back around. And so it is important that you vote and that you're vocal and that you contact your politicians as often and as plenty as possible.
So I totally agree with what both previous speakers said, and I would add that in Puerto Rico we need to stop making the same mistakes. And as AIFA says, we cannot substitute burning one fossil fuel for another. There's a myth about how natural gas is so much cleaner. It's truly a myth. It doesn't incorporate all of the emissions from regasifying the gas, transporting the gas, etc. I think we need to invest what little resources we can get in terms of financing for energy infrastructure in a massive rooftop solar energy project, especially at the community level. You know, community organization obviously is crucial.
Thank you. The next question, I believe, is directed at Gretchen. What is the amount of the debt being imposed because of the hedge funds? What is the amount of the debt being imposed because of hedge funds?
How much of this fund is hedge fund debt? I think the hedge fund debt runs in like a third of the debt is actual hedge funds, I think. No. Give me, no. It's, do you know the number, Edwin? Okay, so I'm not too far off. So it's a composite of hedge fund investors, people that bought junk, people that want to get full value on something they bought at subpar. It's composed of municipal bond investors, and it's composed of Puerto Ricans who have invested. Something I want to clarify on this whole issue, the municipal market there has a purpose. You know, we can demonize the hedge funds for what they do, which is they swoop in and take damaged properties and try to make a profit. It is. But we do have, there is a place for the municipal market. Municipalities and cities and states need it. This is how they finance. So when we think about our debt, some of it is terrible, as we know, but it's not. It's not a black and white issue. There's good debt and there's debt that is harmful. I don't know if I'm trying to understand.
Do any of the panelists want to follow up? No? The next question, with the current economic climate and the effects of Promesa, is Puerto Rico prepared for environmental disasters, hurricanes, droughts, flash floods, etc.? Is the second part, is the infrastructure prepared, and will we have an effective response during the aftermath? Good question.
Okay, so in terms of infrastructure and possible natural disasters, all of Puerto Rico's big power plants are on the coast. The largest energy complex, Aguirre in Salinas, is underwater. I work closely with Dr. Aurelio Mercado. He's Puerto Rico's prime oceanographer. He's so concerned with a project called the Aguirre Offshore Gas Port, which would require billions in investment from, ultimately Puerto Rican ratepayer, right? And he is saying that that project, if built, could just crumble in, in a large tsunami or hurricane. So I do not think, similar to other coastal jurisdictions where lots of the infrastructure is on the coast, the biggest population centers are in the coast, I do not think we are ready, and that's another reason why we should focus on, using the rooftop solar, doing the conservation, doing the energy efficiency, doing the demand management, and not do the same heavy reliance on fossil fuel big plants that are located on the coast.
We have been very lucky that in the last, at least that I been around, last 12 years, there have been no natural disaster in Puerto Rico, namely hurricanes or whatever. This is the hurricane season as we go right now. There's plenty of raining right now, but so far we have been very lucky. As a matter of fact, in my recent past, I live in Culebra, and many times the weather system that comes through where we are, they call it tropical storms, and when they basically leave us, they go into the Atlantic, and they basically become sandy, and all of those weather systems that we have seen here in the United States. Getting back to the whole issue of are we prepared? Unfortunately, no. We have been lucky, but we are not prepared. And the objective reality is that the fiscal crisis have an impact on everything. For example, the hospital systems in Puerto Rico, all of them are losing money, and many of them are starting to have layoff and all of that stuff. So if we have a natural catastrophe, they will be very thin in terms of resources.
So I was told we have 5 minutes before we go to our breakout sessions. So in the sake of time, we'll have one more question. I was also told that several other questions that were provided to us will be given to the moderators during the panels. Some of the questions were directed and can be answered at some of the breakout sessions. So those cards will be appropriately distributed to the different breakout sessions this morning and afternoon. So the final question that I would ask for the panelists to please leave one thought, comment, or call of action that you could each leave with the audience here today. The final question, we discussed health disparities on the island, but can you get a bit more specific on how it impacts children with disabilities and how it's impacting women?
Well, the reality is that right now, for example, Zika, that is a mother of a problem, in the sense that the proportions are between 1% to 13% of the women that get impacted with that are pregnant and get Zika will potentially have children with disabilities. And by the way, lately on the whole thing of Zika, we still know very little about the implications for children and for adults, particularly on the brain. So the question is that, and going back to what Gretchen said, that if it costs anywhere from $1 to $10 million over a lifetime of a baby with Zika because of microencephalitis, you could see potentially hundreds and hundreds of children in Puerto Rico that will be completely disabled and in a country that is completely flat broke. That is a major humanitarian crisis.
Almost like to contribute, or with that, I guess final statements. So final thoughts, comments, perhaps call of action to those who are here today.
Okay. So I think what we are doing here today needs to be replicated. We need to stay organized. I also agree we need to do the voter registration and really get out the vote and choose those candidates that, and make Puerto Rico part of the agenda, right? I think we need to work in our local community organizations for more sustainability. I think that in terms of our communities, we have lots of work to do as to just preventative health issues like food choices. I was so impressed with the Asociación Puerto Rican en Marcha has a food buying program, okay? So what they do is they purchase fresh fruits, vegetables, and they have an organization that does the distribution at the community level. That's so important. Let's get involved in these, find out what's going on in terms of energy efficiency in our communities, in terms of conservation, in terms of even maybe solar communities. And let's share that knowledge with organizations in PR. Thank you.
I grew up in Puerto Rico, and one of the great pleasures of this time of my life in dealing with the Puerto Rican crisis is that I have had the pleasure of meeting the Puerto Rican diaspora throughout the United States. And it's magnificent, and it's strong, and it's wonderful, and it's interesting, and I have greatly enjoyed that. I think we have a lot of work to do. I think we have the power to do it. I grew up in a Puerto Rico that was strong and healthy and wealthy, and I think we can bring it back to where it was. I think that is part of the reason that drives me, that I can see what it was and I can see what it has become. But is there anybody out there from the Puerto Rican, from the island, and particularly from the Puerto Rican government, you have to give us something to work with. I think something that I'm curious about how things will work out in the future with the task force is, will we have fiscal plans that are based on revenues and that are not like pie in the sky things that they come up with and they have no way of funding? Will we have some type of fixing of our contracting procedures, where the contracting system in Puerto Rico is non-existent? There's not a competitive process and it's not open and clear. Will there be greater transparency in government actions, bills that are not passed in the middle of the night? So as we as a diaspora move forward, I feel strongly, very strongly about bringing Puerto Rico back. I hope that Puerto Rican leaders will give us material to work with as we move forward, because there's so much we can do for the island if the island does not do it for itself. And one last thing, I hope Puerto Rican voters are more wise in their selection of leaders and choosing people that can run the island and administer the island, not just people that know to wave a flag in a caravana.
Well, for me, Puerto Rico is beautiful, with wonderful natural resources, with beautiful, fantastic people. And the same way that in New York City, and I was there in 1975, 76, 77, went through the crisis that it had, and New York has come back in great strength, even more beautiful than it was before. I just came back from Detroit, the same thing. So we are gonna get out of it. And you know why we're gonna get out of it? Because the contradiction that we have as Puerto Ricans leave to the United States, Puerto Ricans acquire political power. And you folks are helping us in Puerto Rico to acquire more political power, to give us the tools to make sure that we can make the changes that are needed so we can then be incredibly happy about Puerto Rico.
Let's give one final applause for all three panelists today.